I know how much blood, sweat, and tears I put into my gap year and how painful it was. And I really thought I earned the right to be on the team. And so when they said no, it really broke something in me. And it made me question a ton of different things. I started thinking back to my semester abroad, away from my family, if it was worth it. And so one last Hail Mary, I reached out to a bunch of Ivy League schools and I said, if this doesn't work, then it's time to hang up the spikes.
He's a Division I track athlete at Brown University, a two-time national champion, a content creator, a film festival winner, and a man who loves a good side quest. We're joined by Gabriel Tai. Gabe, I want to start at the beginning of your track career. Can you share the story about your dad betting you that you couldn't beat his high school high jump PR?
It's really funny. Whenever people ask me what my origins to track and field are, it's this story that comes to mind all the time. So I played basketball growing up. That was like my main sport. Played volleyball, swam, did a bunch of different sports. But track and field was something I didn't really do. And my school actually didn't have a team later on after COVID. They canceled the team. But when I was playing basketball, like the biggest thing I liked to do was jump, dunk. Like that was my definition of what made you a good basketball player, which obviously isn't the case. But with that, my dad came up to me and was like, oh, maybe you should try high jump. And he was telling me about his county championships where he cleared 6 feet for the first time. And I was like, you know what? I think I could do that. And my dad was like, I don't know. It's up there. And I remember I was like putting up like a light stand. We measured it up to 6 feet. I was like jumping next to him. Like, I'm pretty sure I could clear this. So I went to my PE teacher at the time in high school, who actually was teaching a high jump unit. And I just went up there. I set up the bar. He let me kind of, do it on my own after school. And I remember I was jumping, like my knee was hurting. It was like the 50th jump or something, but I put the bar 1 centimeter higher than my dad's PR. And then I jumped it and I cleared it. And I remember I ran home. I showed my dad what I did, and he was super impressed. And I remember I was talking to another one of my friends that moved to the States that was telling me that if I wanted to do this in college, I had to jump something like 6'5" or 6'6". And in my head, I was like, wow, this is achievable, first day out. And then all of a sudden, I kind of just got engrossed in this whole journey. I left basketball, stopped that sport, and that was around the end of my junior year. And into my senior year, I ended up having the opportunity to go to a place called Spire Academy in the US, all thanks to COVID, because we were online school basically for the first whole semester. So I was only supposed to stay at Spire for 2 weeks. I ended up loving it, and the coaches really liked training me. And I ended up staying for the entire first semester, where I was training throughout the day. I was studying from like 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. online with my school back home because of the different time zones, applying to colleges. And within that 6 months is when I really fell in love with track and field, and I decided to take a gap year and pursue it. And obviously there's other stuff that happened along the way, but now we're at Brown University, second year in the NCAA. And I'm no signs of slowing down. I still love it as much as I did when I first started.
I'm curious though, what would have happened if you lost that bet?
I probably would have gone out the next day and tried again. I can't lie. I remember really vividly, I had a basketball game that night too. And I went in and I was like hobbling on my leg. Like my knee was in so much pain. But I think one thing that's helped me with this journey is like when I set my eyes on something, it's really hard for me to stop until I get that goal.
Continuing to go until you get it. One thing that you mentioned was you took a gap year. What was that experience like?
That honestly was the best decision of my life. It gave me such an appreciation for the sport, the grind, my country. And so basically the way that worked was during my 6 months at Spire, I was working with a coach named Curtis Beach, and he's an incredible athlete. And he went to Duke University, and I applied to that school because of him. And he told me about the track program, and the goal was for me to walk onto the team if I got in. I ended up getting into the school, but the coach wasn't ready to take me yet. And so he said, if you take a gap year, maybe you can try again next year. So that's what really prompted the whole gap year situation. And for me, it was beyond just track and field. I thought I wasn't really ready for college. I wanted to spend another year at home. And coincidentally, my sister was at Brown at the time, and she took a gap year in between her college years. So we were all back home together. And that just allowed me to have a full year with my family. And besides getting better at track and field, a really big part was learning the culture. And I got a lot better at Vietnamese. I can speak it a lot better now, which is one of the best decisions I've ever made for it.
So a ton of growth and development during that gap year. What were some of the challenging parts of it?
The biggest thing for me was I knew that I wasn't on the team at Duke yet. And since I committed to that school, I didn't have a chance to reach out to other coaches that maybe would have taken me. So I was constantly under the pressure of trying to get marks good enough to make the team. And so that obviously led to a bunch of pressure, like internally, externally. But I think it was great to have that pressure because it really gave me something to work for every single day. It would have been really easy for me to just get into my gap year if I was on a team already, or if I just wasn't really sure where I was going to be next year, and kind of just be complacent with it. And the one thing about training in Asia, I'll say that our techniques, our philosophies are a bit outdated, but one thing we do really well is everyone in Asia works really hard. Like the training to this day, I haven't had as much volume and as hard of trainings as I had during my gap year. You know, in the US, it's a lot more quality focused, which is great. But that gap year alone, besides like getting me more fit and more experience, it built so much mental grit, which was so challenging. I remember we were doing workouts that I couldn't even fathom. Like we were running in the morning and then we'd come back in the afternoon. So it was filling up my entire schedule. I was doing 2-a-days, basically 4 to 5 times a week and 1-a-days the rest of the time. And that was a huge challenge, just getting there, knowing that I'm going to be in so much pain, knowing that I'm going to be, fighting for my life by the end of the workout and having to do it all over again in the afternoon. And again, with that pressure, I knew that I had to give it my all every single day.
Yeah, quantity has its quality of its own, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can you share your experience going from Duke to Brown then?
So once I got to Duke, I got marks good enough for the coach to consider me for a tryout. And so I got to Duke and I spent 2 weeks with the team, training with them. And ultimately, the coach's decision came down to a time trial that we ran at the end of my 2 weeks there. And so I ran the time trial and I just wasn't up to their standards. So they said I didn't have a spot on the team, which was devastating. I remember it was probably the hardest thing to go through. I know how much blood, sweat, and tears I put into my gap year and how painful it was. And I really thought I earned the right to be on the team. And so when they said no, it really broke something in me. And it made me question a ton of different things. I started thinking back to my semester abroad, away from my family, if it was worth it, spending an entire 6 months, which was probably the last part of my adolescence that I'd be at home. And I was just like questioning if it was worth it. And so one last Hail Mary, I reached out to a bunch of Ivy League schools, which to me was the only jump I was willing to make because Duke is such an amazing university academics wise. And that was always my focus growing up. And so I reached out to a bunch of Ivy League schools and I said, if this doesn't work, then it's time to hang up the spikes. And that was in like September. I knew I was transferring basically right after the tryouts. And I remember I was speaking with the Harvard coach for some time. He gave me a spot on the team, but wasn't able to help me with the admissions. So that was really up to me. And then it wasn't till like 3-4 months later that I got a word back from the Brown coach. And the only reason that happened was because my sister goes to Brown and she was floor mates with the team captain. And she asked the team captain to put in a word for me. And the coach got on a call with me. And he basically just said, look, sorry, I missed your email. Would love to give you a shot. These are the next steps. And so the entire year at Duke, I was training with a high school club, which was a really tough situation. I had to go to practice on my own. I had to, make up excuses if I had to skip classes for competitions. And it really was a situation where I just was like, am I in over my head? I'm not sure if this is really what I should be doing. But then eventually I got my letter back and I got into Brown. I tried reaching out to Duke again to see if they would take me the next year with my new marks from the year that I spent training by myself. And they weren't willing to take me again. So I decided to hedge my bets, take it out, and commit to Brown. And this is my second year here, and it's honestly the best decision I ever made. Neck and neck with taking a gap year, I'd say.
Hey, quick pause. If this conversation is providing you value, please take literally 5 seconds and hit that follow or subscribe button on your app. This is the best way to make sure that you don't miss any value from future episodes. Now back to the conversation. And you switched to pole vault and you end up becoming a 2-time national champion. What do you think are the most important habits that have allowed you to have that success?
Truthfully, it doesn't feel like I'm doing much because I love this so much. Like I have to force myself to take days off. I really want to be at the track, any time of the day. Like it's really something that gets me out of bed. It's something I'll always put 100% into. And I really hope, people in the world can find something that gives them that same motivation. Because there's no feeling like working towards a goal that you just absolutely want to achieve so bad. And so I think it's really hard to achieve something if you really don't love it. It's all I think about. I'm watching videos almost constantly on my phone, saving them to my folders, analyzing technique, all that different stuff. And that bleeds into my trainings. And a lot of the time it does create habits of overthinking and, like mental difficulties. But at the end of the day, I really think that it's my love for this sport that's allowed me to make the progress I have and continue to make progress. When I know most people that I've started with, I kind of just fell off because they honestly just fell out of love with the sport.
So what if you were standing on the podium right now, receiving your medal? What would you be feeling?
The first nationals that I won was a junior national championship. And obviously that was a huge achievement to be the best in my country at that age group. But winning senior nationals meant I was the best in the entire country. And I have the medal right there. I actually don't know which one's which. Standing on that podium, it's interesting. I thought I'd feel this like euphoric feeling. But honestly, I was more excited for like the future than that singular moment there. For me, this was really just a stepping stone. Like, I'm so far from what I want to achieve in this sport. For me, I'm not satisfied until I achieve all my goals, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. I know there's so much more to come, and so standing there really was more of like a fortifying feeling that told me I was on the right path. And I've been searching for that feeling for so long, and I think getting to Brown and competing here and training here, and becoming team captain this year, those are all these little things that make me feel like I'm doing the right thing, which is so important for me because if I feel like I'm doing the right thing, I'm all in. I keep going. And I think the day that I feel like I'm pushing it too far or this isn't my path anymore, that's really the day that's going to be the toughest for me because I'm going to have to really take an internal look and, see if it's time to hang up the spikes. But I'm far from that right now. And that moment on the podium really just gave me that fortifying thought of just to keep going. Like this is the path right now. And we're just getting started.
Everything that you've done is very impressive in terms of the accomplishments and the progress that you've made. If we switch gears for a second, what are some fears, doubts, and insecurities that you faced along the way?
I think coming into university where we compete every single week, there have been so many bad competitions that I've had. And going up like against these guys that are literally Olympic qualifiers, all these different athletes, it's a whole different game coming to the US. Like it's the best of the best. There's kids from Europe, there's kids from obviously all across the US. And so I think the biggest fear for me is not necessarily the fact that I think my work won't pay off. It's more so the fact that I sometimes feel like I don't belong. I mean, I remember going to my first IB champs, I was lining up next to guys that were, national qualifiers and stuff. And I just felt so out of place. And I remember on day one of the multi, I was dead last, like literally last place by like maybe 200 points. And on day two, I kind of just went in with nothing to lose. And I was able to climb my way up and score a medal for the team. But that moment right there, it really unlocked a new fear because up till then, we had little meets that we were competing against. You'd have the odd person that was incredibly good, but it wasn't until I reached the Ivy championships where I felt so out of place. And I think going forward, I'll always have that fear of feeling like I just don't belong. Like I'm just not good enough to be hanging with these guys. And I can work as hard as I want, I can do all the things I can, but that fear will always be there. And I think that's definitely a mental shift that I have to work on. But I would say right now as a track athlete, that's definitely something that I've been battling with the most mentally.
Nobody is immune to it. Everyone has some sort of fear that they're facing. If they say they don't, they're lying. In your own words or in your own experience, what have you done to reset quickly?
It's funny you say that. I actually was speaking to some teammates about this, and this kid on our team named Trevor Wilder, he's the fastest kid on our team right now. He's so impressive, and I think what makes him so impressive is his ability to just go in and tell himself that he's gonna kill. And so we kind of talked about it. And for me, in my own words, I think what resets it is you have to be delusional. You have to go into these meets and you have to feel like you are the best person there, that you are going to kick ass, that you're going to destroy your competition and that you're the best in the world. Like if you don't walk into a competition feeling that way, chances are you're not going to put out the performances that you want. Like you have to have this kind of, it doesn't have to be outwardly arrogant, but you have to have this internal arrogance, I'd say, where you kind of walk in like you're the man. And that confidence is going to carry you through performances when you feel scared, performances when you feel lonely, whatever it is. That delusion is what helps you reset.
Yeah, and another area that you've had success but didn't come without challenges is you were rejected from film school, so you taught yourself. Where did the inspiration to just self-educate and start creating incredible content come from?
I think long before track and field, filmmaking was a love that I felt like that came into my lap, like almost serendipitously. I remember I was taking a class in middle school and I wasn't too excited for it. It was like a filmmaking course. It was like a mandatory class that all sixth graders had to take. And in that class, I had a teacher named Mr. Neesmith who taught me so much about the art. And I just realized like it's just such a magic tool to have a camera in your hand and be able to tell your story. Obviously, if you're a writer, you have the ability to tell stories with words. And if you're a painter, you have the ability to tell story with paintbrushes, with drawing up pictures and paintings. But with a camera in your hand, you have the ability to do both, which I think is so incredible. You have the ability to masterfully compose your shots. You have the ability to write a story, a script like I do with College Diaries. And that kind of set off this spark within me that just made me shoot everything and anything. I remember making so many movies, posting them on YouTube, and getting a lot of hate and stuff like that. But those reps really just built this like desire to keep growing and to keep getting better. And I think that's part of the reason why I wasn't too scared when I didn't get into film school, because I knew that leading up to that moment, all the training that I had was all on my own. And I knew that regardless of where I'd end up, I could take classes anywhere, but also I knew I'd keep doing it on my own. And that's what I've been doing. I've been making movies, never stopped ever since. And I love documenting my life. I love sharing my story. I love helping other people, inspire them to do the same. And so that love came really fast, and it's never faded ever since.
What is the best piece of advice you would give to somebody creating content?
Consistency, that's the biggest thing, and it's honestly something I think it's the biggest thing I fall short on as well. The most growth and the most inspiration that I put forth that I've seen was when I was posting all the time, when I was making videos that excited me, when I was being very candid and genuine, showing my side of the story, whether it was a great meet, whether it was a terrible one, whether I was homesick, whether I was, battling these mental challenges with whatever it was, missing my parents, my family, school stress, all that stuff, consistently putting it out there in a genuine voice without trying to like portray myself as someone that has it all figured out. That's the best way you can captivate an audience. And, you can fall in line with these trends however you want. Maybe you'll have one video that goes viral. But I think the challenge and what most content creators should always reach for or strive for is creating content that's going to make someone look at it and want to click follow. Like, you can have millions of views on a trend, but people aren't going to be bought into your story unless you make something genuine and you really show what you're going through, and people want to see your life.
Yeah, 100%. And that's incredible advice. And that's the reason that I asked you to be on this show. So I appreciate you being genuine and authentic. You're impressive as an athlete, as a content creator. I can tell you're very close with your family. I know you had a video that you talked about being homesick. You post videos about side quests. One question I have is the idea of simple wins is not only the scoreboard. What does simple wins mean to you?
I think simple wins, something that's really changed my mentality when it comes to working hard is really defining your goals not as outcome goals, but as like input goals. Being input driven, which I actually credit to Coach Z, who's a coach that I worked with over summer and winter break. The idea of being input driven, if you can just put goals out that make sure that you're going to bed on time, that you're putting in the hours in the training room to make sure that you're staying healthy, that you're giving your all during practice, the outcomes will come later. And that's the small wins that you want to achieve every single day. And I think one saying that's really kept me going with a lot of this is people tend to overestimate what they can accomplish in a month, but they really underestimate what you can do in a year. If you really just put every effort you have every single day towards a certain goal, I think you'd really surprise yourself if you did that for an entire year. And so those little habits, those little small wins that you can accomplish every single day will compound over years and years and years. And eventually, every couple of years, you'll look back and you won't even recognize yourself from 1 or 2 years ago just because of how much progress you've made. So I think those small wins are very much input focused and what you can put into your life. You can't guarantee the outcome of anything, but you can 100% guarantee what you put into your work and what you put into your life.
Gabe, you're extremely impressive. You're authentic. You're genuine. Where can people find you online?
I post on TikTok and Instagram at GABTHAI. I love sharing my story. I love connecting with my audience. And I think that genuine content is what has attracted people to my page. So hopefully you guys can come along for the ride and, see what's going on this year and the next couple of years. I mean, hopefully I can continue staying on it and continuing to post videos for you guys.
Gabe, really appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I have one final question for you. Who else would benefit from listening to this conversation? If you have someone in mind, go ahead and share the episode with them right now. If you don't think of anyone immediately, go ahead and leave us a review on whatever platform you're on so people just like you can find the episode. Thank you for your time. Stay strong.